Welcome to Squad Talk. This is a program that engages in conversation about the changing business landscape and how human capital and other C suite leaders are approaching this. I'm Susan Gans, your host. I am an outsourced chief of staff and I am an advisor with PortlyAI and head up the human capital squad. Today, I'm so delighted to welcome in Sarah Madden. Sarah is the founder and CEO of Madden Talent Partners, which is a boutique executive search firm built to deliver a more strategic, flexible, and high touch approach to hiring. Sarah has over 20 years of experience leading talent acquisition within private equity backed portfolio companies, environments, as well as high growth businesses. She brings that operator's lens to the work that she does. Help me in welcoming Sarah to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to be here and so nice to talk people topics with another, HR executive and excited for the discussion today.
Fantastic. So let's dive in. So, given the context of the work that you do, please share with our audience a
Mhm.
brief background of your industry and the changes and transformations that you've seen and experienced over the last few years.
Yeah, my background spans a lot of areas within, I would call talent management, but like over the last recent years, I've focused heavily in executive search. And what I'm seeing is a real shift in companies from hiring in a transactional way. So what that means is like, hey, Sarah, we need a VP of marketing with 10 years experience, X amount of softwares, go find them, to much more an outcomes-based approach to hiring. So what I see in good companies doing this is really, before they even embark on a search, they're saying, okay, what do I want this role to deliver on in the next 6 to 12 months? What does good look like? What problems is this role going to solve within my business? And then working backwards to then say, okay, knowing all of that, what is this person? What do they do? What is their background? What are their skills? So I see it, and I know we'll talk a little bit about skills-based hiring in more
Yes.
questions in the future, but I see a real shift happening there. And I also work with my clients that necessarily don't do that and try to get them to think that way, because I truly believe that is the best way you're going to find the right people to move your business forward. And then on the flip side, what I'm seeing on the candidate end is companies are moving that way. They're thinking that way now. But unfortunately, what I'm seeing with candidates who are in the market, and there's a ton of excellent talent in the market right now. But what I'm seeing is those candidates are still portraying themselves in an older way, right? Like it's still the resume that says, I led a team of 10. Well, great. Or I worked in this software. Those things don't matter as much anymore. Really, what companies want to hear is what did you deliver? What skills did you gain? What challenges did you overcome? Um, what were the outcomes on those? What problems did you solve? And a lot of time, I don't see that in resumes. I still don't see it. And I think candidates have a hard time putting it to paper on their resumes. And I also see that they have a hard time explaining that in interviews or necessarily don't show up to interviews ready to explain that to companies. So that's really the shift I'm seeing is a much more strategic approach to hiring, more outcomes based, more tied to business solutions that this person's going to solve and move the company forward. Then on the flip side, it's almost like a disconnect in communication. I don't see candidates showing up to present themselves in that light.
So, just digging deeper for a moment into this notion that candidates haven't caught up yet to this strategic problem solving approach to framing themselves, how do you coach or get the message out to folks? Because
Yeah.
sometimes in the recruiting realm, you get,
Yes.
we've gone in a different direction. You don't get that
Yes.
specific feedback. So I'd like to give back
Yes.
to the people who might be watching.
Totally. Totally. There's a couple things I do, and I'll get to it in a few
Yes.
discussions that we're about to have.
Yes.
But what I tend to do with my clients is I put together, so there's two things. One is I take away the job description when I work with my clients, and I put together a candidate brief. And this
Okay.
candidate brief tells the story about the company, the role, what this role is going to achieve, the problems it's going to solve, what grade is going to look like. And it's much more of a really good document for the candidates that are then interviewing to know, okay, how do I present myself in that light? So it actually helps the candidates be able to visualize what does success actually look like in this role and at this company. A lot of times it's amazing how that's not very unclear from day one. What does good look like? So there's that. The other thing is when I'm working with candidates, I tend to be, and again, this is just stuff I've learned over the years, be direct. And being direct with people, it just helps them so much more. So I have looked at resumes, told colleagues, hey, that resume, you got to beef up this. You got to talk about this. Get rid of, I ran a team of 10. Great. No one cares anymore, really. It's what have you done? What problems did you solve? What did you achieve? And then a lot of people say, well, that solution or what we were working on, it didn't work. It failed. Well, that's okay too. I actually think explaining like, here's what I learned from this. Here's why it didn't work, but here's like a different path we took. All of those things really tell the story of the candidate better to the employer. So I do it in two ways. Really, it's trying to just help candidates that I'm personally working with.
I like that approach, and particularly around, well, even if the solution didn't work, there's great
Yeah.
learnings there because from the trends that I'm seeing, conversations that I'm happening, what people are talking about is this mindset of continuously learning and providing that psychological safety of experimentation. And that's what's going to
Yes.
move the needle for companies going forward. So I love that you're
Yeah.
coaching your candidates around that.
Yeah. And especially too, I think what companies really like there too is that someone's not afraid to fail. Someone's not afraid to try something and fail and then get back up and do it again and try to do something in a better way. I just think that shows a lot about the person um, willing to put that time in. So.
Absolutely. And you've started to allude to this, but what are you doing as a leader in the driver's seat to drive the change from both a personal and a professional perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's two things here. From a professional perspective, it's really about how I show up for my clients. So I tend to, and really why I launched Madden Talent Partners, I come to executive search very much with an operator hat on because I have sat in companies. I've sat in a big holding company where we had a bunch of portfolio businesses. Those companies were going through significant transformation. I had to hire new leadership teams. We had to hire new talent. We had to put in the right recruitment processes. I've also been in businesses where we were getting that company ready for an exit, or we just acquired a business and we needed to bring them in and fold them into the portfolio. So any of my executive search process comes with this operator lens on. So similar to what I was just saying earlier, what I'd like to do with my clients is when they say, okay, Sarah, we're looking for, I keep saying VP of marketing, it's just in my head. When we're looking for a VP of marketing, here's the job spec, here's what we need. I say, okay, when I'm meeting with that leader to do a debrief before we, embark on the search, I say, let's put the job description away. Let's sit down for a minute and you tell me what does success look like here in 6 to 12 months? What will this person deliver on? What are the outcomes? What does really good look like? And I will tell you the amount of times CEOs or leaders look at me and they're just like, oh, wow, I'm not quite sure. Or great question. Let me think about that. Totally fine. Let's think on it, but we really need to have those things answered before we go try to recruit someone because we really need to get clear on what are we looking for, what are we solving for, and then let's go find that person that has those skills. So I spend a lot of time up front kind of working through that type of thinking. Then on a personal level, what I've realized over the years, and really what I like to do now is I take a very consultative approach. I also like to be direct, and I like to kind of basically sit down with my clients and say, whether it's around compensation or market dynamics, here's the reality of the market. So, a lot of times, for example, what I see happen with companies is they say to me, okay, Sarah, here's everything we need this person to solve. Here's the skills, here's the capabilities, here's what we're looking for, and we want to pay X. And I'm like, oh God, that compensation is so far off the market, and I'm real with them. I just say, look, here's the deal. You're gonna have to, if you want to do all these things and you want all this accomplished, you're gonna have to pay this in the market, especially since you're gonna have to try to recruit someone away from a role or entice someone who's really good. And at that point, what happens is two things. One is the company now, that leader has enough, I call it ammunition, but has enough information to then go to their CFO and say, Mr. CFO, Mrs. CFO, I have this role that's going to solve X, Y, and Z in our business, do these solutions for us, but we're going to need to pay X. And a lot of times the CFO may say, okay, well, because this person's going to get X, Y, and Z done and they're going to move the business forward in this way, great, we can get more compensation. A lot of times, no, they say, shoot, this is the budget, here we are. That's fine too. But then what I need to do with my client is say, okay, then we need to level set, right? Like this person, we're going to look for someone a little less experienced, maybe hasn't done all these things, but it may take 2 years for them to deliver on these things, not one. But let's just get aligned on that. You know what I mean? So I think, and I will say this on the CFO conversation, when a leader has the detail to say, this is what I want this person to do at our company and deliver and solve and move the dial forward, a lot of times they're able to go get more compensation. If you just go to that CFO and you say, here's a job description and I want to pay X, the CFO is just going to say, okay, well, great, we can't. So it gives them a little bit more information to work with. So personally, for me, it's not just like, Sarah, here's a job spec, go do. I put my operator hat on. I get my companies to think a little bit more strategically about the hire, bring the reality of the market into play. So we're not spinning our wheels and not able to find the right person.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is you present a business case like doing any initiative, and you help
Yeah,
walk the CFO over that bridge to say, here's where we are at, here's where we want to go, and this is what this person's going to do, and there's going to
yeah.
be a return on this investment, but we have to give it time for the payback period.
Exactly. Exactly. It should be that way. I mean, I think with hiring, it should be very intentional. It should be much more like a business case. Yes, like this is what we're doing. This is what, because you're paying someone a good amount of money. You want to know what they're going to solve and do and move forward in our business. So let's not be transactional with it. Let's be more intentional. Yeah.
Like it. So then how do you guide your clients and the talent through this era that we're in with a lot of change and transformation at a very quick pace? And then how do you prepare yourself for these quick changes and the
Yeah.
folks you work with?
Yeah. So I think going through a lot of this is helping my clients navigate the complexity of hiring. And I say getting out of their own way because a lot of times hiring is complex. There's a lot of bias. And that's fine, but let's try to bring some rigor, some process so we can de-risk the hire, but also get rid of some of this complexity. So what happens is what I see a lot of times is companies have this gap between what they think they want in the hire versus what the market actually is and what's available to do, who's available to really do that. So again, as I said earlier, working through more of these processes where you're going and doing a debrief and you're getting really deep on what do we want this person to solve? What do we want this person to do? When you get really clear on that, then that door opens to really get a little bit more open-minded with the type of person that you're looking for and a little bit more skills-based type of hiring. But what I've seen historically happen with companies is the complexity comes into the process, the bias comes into the process, and all of a sudden they're looking for a unicorn. And here comes the unicorn hire. And I've done unicorn hires. I've made unicorn hires. It happens. It can be done. But I will tell you, most of the time, unicorn hires don't work out. And typically, the reason why is when you look at the must-haves and the nice-to-haves, companies go way overboard on the must-haves. And a lot of the must-haves are trainable, they're coachable things. A lot of the nice to haves, that list is really small, but what they're missing is a lot on the nice to haves are culture fit, the environment. Does this person get energy from this role? Things that are not teachable. And so typically, when a unicorn hire doesn't work out, it's because of those, like you call them soft skills, but the things that are not teachable because we overlook them. We purely went off a resume in reality. We said, okay, it's VP of, product. They've got X. They've been in this particular industry because we need someone from this industry. They've got this software. They've got 10 years. We just did a checklist of all the things on the resume, but failed to really look at the soft skills side, which really can make or break, which in my view makes or breaks a hire, to be honest. So because of the complexity, what I like to do is I rely heavily on communication and alignment. I like to make sure that all the stakeholders, whoever is going to be interviewing, is aligned on this hire. They all know here's what we're looking for, here are the must-haves, here are the nice-to-haves, here's what we want this person to come in and solve. Here are the things we're willing to give on because at the end of the day, someone can learn them. We get super aligned on that because we want to have a really thoughtful process. And the other thing, when I say alignment, is that it's so important to think about with these companies. Again, when hiring becomes complex and there's so many people involved, when they're not intentional about it and they don't have a process, they forget about the candidate experience. When I was in-house, the candidate experience, and it's still important being external, but it was one of the most, and still is, one of the most important things. So when you don't have a thoughtful process, there's no rigor to it, there's no structure, the team isn't really aligned, no one really knows the questions they're going to be asking, candidates pick up on that very easily. And they quickly will realize, ooh, this company doesn't have their act together. And you're never going to get strong top talent with that type of process. So, really, what I try to do is break down the complexity, get companies out of their own way, reduce some of the bias, put in some process, because you got to put your best foot forward, especially in this market, even though there is a lot of talent out there. Again, top talent wants to feel like the process is thoughtful. So,
Absolutely. And that alignment amongst the leaders is
yeah,
very key. Very key.
yeah. Yeah, yep. I can't tell you there's so many times where, again, not recently, not with the clients I have, but when I was in-house, there was some of this where in our portfolio companies, you had executives meet with a colleague or another colleague, and the person would say, "So, what am I meeting with you today about? What's this role?" And that's what are we doing? Like this is important.
Yeah,
This is how you're presenting your company. Yeah, so you got to have those processes buttoned up.
absolutely. So, given what you've experienced, how do you see the HR function and workforce transforming given the age we are in the AI era?
Yeah. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. I, first of all, love HR. So I have sat in HR teams, wonderful HR teams. I have been an interim head of HR in a few of our portfolios when we were looking for a person at the same time, so have sat in that seat. And I'm just going to get on my soapbox here quickly on HR. I think HR is one of the most important functions within a business, and it should always report to the CEO, never put it under finance. I've seen that before. So that's just my soapbox piece on HR. But from an HR perspective and how AI is going to transform it, I have a rosier picture on AI and how it's going to impact HR. I actually think it's very much going to put HR up the value chain and really give HR a bigger and better voice and the voice that it always needs to have in a company. And Susan, you know this too, like HR is very much a lot of times bogged down by administrative tasks in the company. There's a lot of very important administrative tasks that HR owns and drives. And it's really the glue of the company. Like you have to be doing these things for
Yes.
compliance reasons and employee benefits. And they keep that company together and humming. So very important. But what problem is with HR is that a lot of times in most companies, HR gets so bogged down by those tasks that they never have time to pick their head up to really action the people strategies and even the things that they're seeing with some of the data and the trends that they're seeing with their employee base. Like they just don't have enough bandwidth to do it. So where I see HR coming in is automating and transforming a bit the administrative side to HR, which will then allow these HR leaders who have wonderful ideas and they see great things in the businesses to be able to action really great people strategies and have more of that voice that they really need to have. The other thought I have on this is AI will certainly contribute to this skills-based hiring in a big way. I think HR is now seeing it where companies are going to need to better understand the skills they have in their business, the skills they're going to need, and where they need to train people on those skills that they're going to need, or where they're going to recruit those skills. But I think AI is going to help in that way, whether it's something related to interconnecting with the HRIS system, whatever it might be. But I think it's going to provide some really insightful, again, data actions analysis that HR leaders can go execute on.
So you're really speaking my language, and what you're saying is resonating with me because I've always thought that I've put HR the seat at the table with this
Yeah,
CISO because that people are at the heart of every business. I don't care if you're a
yeah,
manufacturer, a service company, an AI company, it doesn't matter. It's still the humans that are running. So
yeah.
I I 100% agree with you there. I'm curious, what skill sets are you seeing that are important in the go forward?
It's a great question. I'm seeing, so I think here's what I think is going away. And it's funny, I feel like it's very tactical skills. It's a lot of the, Excel analysis, data work, um, putting slides together, like some of that stuff, like that's going to get automated. And AI is just going to end up doing it better and more efficiently and quicker. Where I actually think the skills are going to be is much more around the soft skills, is kind of what I'm seeing. Is like someone to be able to be an excellent leader, lead through change management, transformation, being able to think quickly and make quick decisions and the right decisions based on a lot of different inputs that they're getting. Um, I think, and then truly the soft skills, being able to work across teams, collaborate, influence, like those, I don't see AI replacing that. And if anything, with AI now entering the workforce more, I think you're going to need more of those skills and abilities. That's kind of what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It is. I'm also seeing that collaboration, resiliency,
Yep.
ability to lead through change, project management, all the things that you've
Yep.
mentioned. So, what lessons have you learned throughout your journey as an operator and now having your own business? And then, what guidance would you
Yep.
give to our audience?
Yeah. I would say a couple things. I would say one of my biggest things is like clarity is everything. When you are clear, particularly I'm going to go back to hiring, but when you are clear on what you're hiring for, what type of talent you need to bring into your business, what you're actually solving for, the better outcomes you're going to have. And so a lot of hiring challenges and a lot of things, it's just clarity is not there. When you made the wrong hire, you really didn't know what the role was, or you didn't know what the role was and you weren't assessing the right type of talent pool. So clarity is key. Another big lesson is that what I have always seen, and even in this market where there's wonderful talent on the market, talent, really good talent wants to be sold. Companies sometimes forget that when you are in an interview process, that candidate is interviewing you just as much as you are interviewing them. And it is so important to have a buttoned up process and put your best foot forward so you can actually attract and get the right strong talent interested in your business. I think that is huge. And I still think companies to this day overlook that. And again, it goes back to the candidate experience, but I think it's super important. I'd say the other thing that I've learned over the years is to manage expectations throughout these processes. When I was younger and, within this portfolio company setting and a CEO would come to me and say, "Hey, Sarah, we need a, VP of HR and we got to go out and here's the spec, go find him." I'd be like, eager beaver. Okay. Okay, here we go. I got the spec. The CEO knows what they need. They're good. I just got to follow this spec. We would end up, again, we would find the hire, but it felt like we were spinning wheels more. A lot of times we would meet candidates and the CEO would say, "Okay, they're great, but I wonder if we need more of this, or now I'm unsure. What do you think on this?" It would just be a longer time to get to the end goal. And so again, I go back to clarity is everything and be intentional about what you're doing is really important. And then I would say, around all of this is process is king or queen, whatever you want to call it, but process is everything. And I want to give a quick shout out to Greenhouse, which was an ATS system that I implemented across our portfolio companies. Um, and I loved it because Greenhouse was really, I feel like, one of the first ATS systems that came up with structured hiring. And you could put into the system at least a structure for the role, the skills, what are we looking for, to then how do we set up the interview process so everyone on the team was aligned with what they're asking, what we're looking for. And it was wonderful. And I didn't realize, and I realize it now, but how important having a process and a structure to what you're doing is like critical to get the best outcomes. So I just say clarity is everything. It may take a little time up front to get that clarity, but then you will move a lot faster and be much more efficient. And I think, again, the challenges that HR sees, because I felt it when I was in-house, and you always feel it when you're in executive search, is like, we need the hire and we needed it yesterday. It's like, I get it. We want to move at speed. I move at speed, but you got to move intentional so you can actually move quickly. So again, clarity, having that up front builds kind of that momentum.
Yes, and what I'm also hearing from you, it's really having companies think about their branding in terms of the company itself
Huge.
to talent.
Yes, it is huge. And I also tell clients, like, don't paint an overly rosy picture. Like, I think what really good candidates also want to know, and again, what I also put into a candidate brief is what are the challenges that this person's walking into? What isn't so rosy about this role? But how are they going to be able to, work through that or change that or impact that? And I think that's so important. So be real for sure, but just make sure you're really telling your story. I think it's critical.
Absolutely. So, what is one word or phrase that you use to describe the workforce transformation that is going on today? And tell us why you've
Yeah.
chosen this particular word or phrase.
Yeah. I think, and I said it earlier, like clarity creates momentum. And and I said it sort of in our first discussion of where I'm seeing companies move towards when it comes to search is this more intentional way of thinking about roles and what problems are we solving? What skills do we really need in the business? What is this role? How is this role going to help us move the business forward? How is it aligned to business outcomes? When you get really clear on that, you're going to be able to move really quickly and find the right people. But also, like, I feel like it opens up the candidate pool because you're not being so siloed in your thinking. When you just have a job description with this bullet, I need X, I need 10 years experience in this very specific field. Do you really? Or could you find someone that's just as good, that's delivered these types of things, but is in an adjacent industry? And maybe that's better for the business because it brings a new perspective and thought process and something new to the company. So um, I think clarity does create momentum there.
Fantastic. So, in wrapping up our conversation, what would you like our audience to remember about what we talked about today?
Yeah. So I would say two things, and apologies on my phone. Two things. I would say biggest takeaway is to be intentional. And this is for companies and this is for like candidates as well. So if you're a company, keep in mind that hiring I feel like most companies do view this, but hiring is the most important thing you can do as a business. Take it seriously, be intentional, bring an operator hat to what you're doing. And really, like you said, Susan, bring kind of a business case thought process to going to make this hire and get really crystal clear on what you're looking for. The rate of success, if you take that approach, the rate of success is going to be extremely high. And I think the same goes for candidates who are out there looking right now and they're in the market. I would just say, like, focus on when you're presenting yourself and you look at your resume, focus on what you've delivered, focus on challenges you've overcome, skills you've gained, experiences, less about tactical managing a particular team or using a software. Yes, you can mention those, but try to present yourself in that light that I think companies are now looking for candidates and how they're assessing candidates. And I would say the same is when your candidates are out there and they're interviewing, have that mindset a little bit more about what you've delivered, what you've solved, the impacts you've made over the years, what you've learned, challenges you've overcome. I think it will put you in a different, light and frame of thinking for these companies.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you, Sarah, for sharing your insights today. Some things that I took away are certainly that clarity creates momentum, but also that we share this notion that HR needs that seat at the table.
100%.
It's
Yep.
critical, and that companies need to think through the candidate experience just like they would think through the client's experience. And for that matter, I'll extend it to the employee experience just to round out all the different experiences. And I think what you've also touched upon is this notion of change away from traditional job description and hiring practices, where the focus now becomes a business case for what problems is that individual going to be solving, what type of impact, and thinking beyond just a role function and more in a skills based light around what are those key skills that are needed for that person to succeed and make the type of impact that we want in the organization. So really
Yeah.
appreciate you doing this discussion with me today. Ways that folks can find Sarah are the following. You can go to her website, which is Madden Talent Partners, and Madden spelled with two D's, so Madden talentpartners.com. You can email Sarah at sarah@maddentalentpartners.com, or you can find her on LinkedIn under Knight, as in a knight in shining armor, Sarah. So Knight and Sarah Sarah. Again,
Yes.
Sarah, really appreciate it. If our audience wants to learn more about Portly AI and Squad Talk, please visit portly.ai. And in the squad spirit, keep growing and evolving and leading the way.